Enjoy this cool and short listicle provided by Dr. Arthur Versluis from his book Magic and Mysticism, based on philosopher Hans Jonas's existentialist depiction of Gnosticism. Here it is. 1. A hostile cosmos, Gnostic antipathy to nature. 2. A demiurge, or ignorant creator responsible for botched creation and hostile to human spiritual awakening. 3. Dualism, opposition between the realm of light and the realm of matter. 4. An elaborate mythology. 5. Myths concerning Sophia, wisdom, and her fall and restoration. 6. Belief in a hidden god, not the demiurge. 7. Difficulty of spiritual progress due to the archons or other hostile powers in the cosmos. Ignorance of the inherent fallen human condition. 8. Existence of the Ogdoad, or 8 spheres, including 7 planetary spheres, and possibility of their transcendence. 9. The necessity of Gnosis, or direct spiritual knowledge from the realm of light. 10. A revealer or redeemer figure to show the way to the realm of light.
Valentinus believed the world we live in was created by a cruel god, and slightly stupid. A god that will send you plagues, or requires sacrifices, or destroys Babylon.
He wasn't wrong about that. The bastard had a mean temper.
Humans can escape this world, and return to the real one. The kingdom. And for that, you needed to achieve the Gnosis, which could be described as true knowledge.
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. My name is Miguel Connor and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis. And this is Aeon Byte. And we hope to share with you endless possibilities for everything. But in the end, you are the final authority, have always been, not us. But we do hope you've enjoyed that little intro clip on what is Gnosticism, because it's very relevant to what we'll be discussing today. 2 of my favorite subjects in the world, Sabbatean Kabbalah, and of course those wonderful and mercurial and enigmatic serpent Gnostics. So this is going to be a good one, and I'm very excited that you are here in any manifestation across the internet. If you are alive, good to see everybody there. I see Paul Miller from upstate New York. Hello, Paul. Graham Pong is there with the audience. Occult Examiner. Always good stuff you got. So good to see everybody. And as always, if you have any questions, please super chat them so that the Moondog Vance, who I will introduce, but you know he's here, we'll get to them. I'm getting ahead of myself, probably because I'm so excited. But with us today, we've got the man himself, Jon Winder. How are you?
I'm doing great. Much. It's an honor to be here. I've been listening to your show for quite a long time, so I'm super excited.
Oh, excited to have you here, man. I've been reading your articles, and your research is excellent. Way up there. Good stuff that the world needs to see. Always great to see good researchers finding things that others have missed. And it's sober, it's intricate, and it hits a spot, and it will move the needle for all of us who, again, want to find their own path and be their own authority and make up their own damn mind on how to approach these heresies, if you would. And with us too, well, hello, Vance. How are you?
Okay. Hey, I'm doing great. Since I found out I'm not the authority, I can contact my insurance agent, get a reduction on my liability insurance premiums.
Good luck. Speaking of archons, that wickedness in high places. Yeah, good luck with that. You're going to need the pleroma behind you to get that going.
Oh, yeah.
This is the world. This is the world too. Well, not much. There's some housekeeping to do. but I will get to it later on. Again, a lot of exciting shows coming in September that I will share next week. A lot of shows and a lot of really good shows with great guests. I've been busy again recouping from Gnosis. I've also had a lot of projects, including the last edits for the Elvis book and other things I had to do. Yes, and I thought I'd mention I am doing Sid Roth's book on the tripartite tractate. The audiobook should be out in the fall. But if you need any voiceover work for your books, commercials, documentary, video game, or anything, I'm here to help. Podcast introduction, whatever. Always ready to give you some of my Gnostic voice in any capacity you need. So other than that, well, let's start with you, Jon. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a heretic. How did you get into these dangerous topics?
Oh gosh. I've always gravitated towards it. I mean, as a teenager, I started reading at a young age, and I would go to Half Price Books. I think it's a local store, but yeah, and just dig through stuff. And I mean, one thing led to another. I mean, of course, you got to weed through a lot of BS to get to, the real stuff. But yeah, that's the fun part too when you're a kid, right? So it's like, yeah. And I started publishing work. I did my first podcast in 2021, and I opened up my blog just around that time as well. And I've been working towards this for a long time. And, the ideas that I had for my articles, they were in my head for so long. And, I've learned a lot that I just need to go out and do it. I mean, even reaching out to you, you commented under a previous interview I did, and I was like, oh my God, Miguel Connor heard my stuff. And I've for years, and then I finally just decided to send the email, and sure enough, it worked out. So yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is the beginning of a new chapter for me.
Cool. And it's specifically what got you to things like Lurianic Kabbalah or the Ophites? Because again, there's occultism, and then there's really niche stuff, even though everybody wants to blame everything on the Gnostics and the Kabbalists today, but it's still very niche. What attracted you to these traditions?
Well, like I said, I had to weed through a lot of stuff. It's kind of ironic when I would, dig through the old used bookstores and stuff. Of course, I was introduced to like the so-called Hermetic Kabbalah before, and, Dion Fortune and all that kind of stuff. And which, if that were, maybe that's good for beginners. I wouldn't recommend it, honestly, because I feel like it does overlap in a lot of ways. But it's funny because I remember kind of seeing the Gershom Scholem books and being like, oh, that looks boring, or like that's seeing all these names like the Lurianic Kabbalah. I was like, I can't get that deep into. I mean, that's just it was intimidating, and I just was like, that's like too serious or whatever. But then when I finally started reading that, I think it was a book I had on my shelf for like at least 10 years. It's literally just called Kabbalah by Gershom Scholem, and it's really an encyclopedia. And I read about I started reading just certain passages out of it, and it just really I blew my mind. And I think I was exposed to it through the whole, there was kind of a trend to talk about like Saturn and the black cube a few years ago, and friend circle that was kind of popular in 2018, 2019 and stuff. And I just wanted to really figure it out, look in the next level and see. And that's kind of when I found out about Sabbateanism and stuff, because Sabbatai does mean Saturn. And that turns out to be a pretty, important element. It's not mentioned very much throughout the literature, but, I've been able to dig out a lot of references. And, then I realized that even that understanding was, there's just new levels open up. And, I'm still thirstily paging through text, like even leading up to this week, it's great that, that excitement doesn't die down when you keep unlocking new levels,
Amen. Yeah, that's one of the first books I read on the Kabbalah by Gershom Scholem. And I think we talked on the phone that sometimes the guy's like reading Tolkien, because he will just go on all this thick scholarship for pages. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to go in and find one thing and get out. And it's like, any of his works, but he is thorough, and that was his job. And as people know here I love Isaac Luria, and I'm a big fan of Sabbatai Zevi. I thought his transgressive Gnosticism was just so cool, very metal, if you would, and also because he was a manic depressive. Obviously, he was bipolar.
Yeah.
I can relate to his story and his struggle and what he had to go through. So he always spoke to me as sort of an anti-hero. I enjoyed, if you would. So, but where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the Ophites? Do you want to start with Kabbalah? Vance is going to be happy because we're going to decode the Wizard of Oz. Vance has done some excellent Gnostic decodes of the Wizard of Oz, but our guest here does an excellent Kabbalist decode of it. So let me know where you want to start, and we will jump right into it.
Snakes. Come on, give them snakes.
Okay, let's go snakes. I was gonna say start with the Mario and the Wizard of Oz, but honestly, yeah, let's start with the Ophites and the.
Vance is an Indiana Jones. He's not afraid of snakes.
Right.
All right.
And for the record, what you said about the manic depressive thing, that's funny because I always felt that way too. Like that, talking about he would be in these depressive states where he'd isolate himself, and then he'd have periods of illumination where he would come out, and fortunately I'm not in my depressive state right now, so I'm able to pop out. But it's funny, because there's quite a few passages I've read where I'm like, oh god, that sounds pretty familiar. So
yeah, you relate to the struggle, and you're like, I hear you. We want to judge people and whittle the world into good and bad guys, but sometimes we just want humans we can relate to that help us know ourselves, and that's it. So
absolutely. Yeah, and people tend to be pretty black and white when talking about this stuff, which I'm not going to take that approach, and I'm glad that you're not either.
No,
it's a little deeper.
Yeah, we want to be like Jung. We want to be scholars and empiricists and phenomenologists and study it, and then the insight comes instead of good, bad, evil. You know what I mean? Simplifying. This sort of stuff isn't helping society today. It's not. So, but snakes. Where do you want to start? Snakes, the Ophites, or where?
Let's pull up that blog post. It's called Snakes and Saturn, the Sabbatean cemetery symbolism. I got a little onomatopoeia going.
Do you see it? Do I scroll? Let me see.
I think the third, or no, it's below. Yeah, it's below those. There it is.
The Lost Princess?
The one below that. The Sabbatean cemetery symbol.
Okay, let's look at some symbolism here. I don't know if I'm going to try to make it bigger. Let's see if I do it here on my computer.
I don't know what's up with that layout. I've never seen it like that with the moth on the side. It should be full screen, but there we go.
It's my computer. Who knows?
Okay.
All right.
Great. So this is, I'm not going to get into this, but I mentioned I did a series on mesmerism, and I started that out by talking about Mesmer's tombstone. So I kind of wanted to keep that tradition going as I began my series on Sabbateanism, because I think that's a fun angle to come from. So let's pull up that image that's just peeking out right there. So basically these are tombs in Turkey that still exist. Some of them have been destroyed, but some of them do still exist and are still kept according to the religious tradition, because Sabbateanism is still alive. It's, debatable to what extent, but one thing that scholars will not debate is that the Donme in Turkey, who are Sabbatean followers who converted to Islam, it does still exist. And this is one of their tomb graveyards that does still exist. And we're going to
hold on 1 second. Yeah, we should give a quick summary of, we know who Zevi was, but 17th century Lurianic mystic Kabbalist who suddenly became... there was some messianic fervor around it, but he was very left-hand path, very transgressive, had his own type of Kabbalah. Eventually, the Turkish powers brought him to, the Turkish authorities brought him to the government, and they said, you have two choices. We execute you or you convert to Islam. He converted to Islam, even with millions of Jews who thought he was the Messiah. I mean, he was 100 times more popular than Jesus in his time. And then he allegedly converted, although they caught him a couple of times saying Jewish prayers and all that, and kicked him out. But they still paid him well, and they still, he wasn't killed. He lived a good life. And then, of course, the movement, the Donme, came out of him in Turkey. And, of course, everybody knows the Donme were very influential once they became secular and overthrowing the Ottoman Turks. Am I missing anything there?
I'll add on a couple things. So that his coronation as Messiah took place, funny enough, in the year 1666, which shortly was followed after the Ottoman emperor giving him the ultimatum to convert or be executed. And he actually declared himself as Messiah originally in 1648, which was actually prophesied in the Zohar that the Messiah would appear in 1648.
Wow.
And that was also the year of the Helmenitki, excuse my pronunciation, pogroms and a huge massacre of Jews. And that's kind of leads to the cultural and political environment that he was emerging out of as a sort of a leader to overthrow the nations that he felt were oppressing his people. And, so there was sort of a revolutionary spirit to it after what had happened. And, and also, so he did convert to Islam, which a majority number wise of his followers thought was the worst thing ever. And they repented forever following him. They were okay with the, breaking kosher laws and all that kind of stuff, but converting to Islam, that's way too far. Exactly. But and like he had a lot of, he one time walked around with a fish in a baby carriage to symbolize that the Messiah would come in the age of Pisces, which at that time it was the age of Pisces. And so another interesting thing, when he did convert to Islam, not only was he allowed to live, but he was actually brought into the highest levels of Ottoman society. He was given a position as gatekeeper for the Sultan, and he ended up becoming a Sufi grandmaster who was highly revered. And as his followers were also heavily involved in like the Bektashi Sufi order and the Mevlevi Sufi order. Really, all throughout, like you mentioned, the Young Turks and all that stuff. I mean, there was a lot of overlap between Sufism and Sabbateanism and Freemasonry later on. A lot of the same people involved in all three of those groups. So that's the summary of, and like I said, it happened in 1666. So there was a strong millenarian aspect to it. There were a lot of Christians who were expecting either the Messiah or the Antichrist or something. So it kind of all just worked out in a pretty significant way. So this is after he converted to Islam. And of course, his followers still were Sabbateans under the curtain, and some of them, genuinely, there's examples of people who genuinely converted to Islam that believed it was a higher religion, that thought that was the ultimate fulfillment of their messianism. And then there's also Sabbateans who it was just a cloak, and they would even use that language of wearing the cloak of Islam in order to just exist in that society. So there's different interpretations of that. But so this is after that took place, and his followers continue to exist, and like I said, some of them still do, and this is one of their graveyards, and the tombs are very symbolic, so I decided to break down the symbolism on them. Here's one with the serpent on the tree, and as you see, there's a descending dove or a bird, and then there's a flying bird. So there's a falling bird and a flying bird, which gets into the dualistic nature of the Messiah. One thing, sort of Kabbalah 101, is that the word Moshiach or Messiah has the same gematria or numerical value as the word Nakash or serpent, which is 358. So there's always been this mystical equation of the Messiah and the serpent, sometimes as two sides of the same coin, sometimes as one and the same. And sure enough, when Sabbatai Zevi donned the turban, which is symbolic of his conversion to Islam, his followers interpreted that as the serpent crown, which we've heard about the serpent crown in other traditions. And, the turban, it kind of wraps around your head in a serpentine form. So that's just an example of how they could kind of cloak this occult symbolism into more mainstream stuff at the time. So I thought that was pretty interesting, the idea of the turban as the serpent ascended to the crown,
And these graves, how recent are these graves?
I honestly don't know. It's anywhere between early 1700s to present. I would guess 1800s is when they were most active, but I don't know for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think these ones still exist. I'm not sure which ones do. I know some of them were demolished, but some of them exist. So so that's, the serpent on the tree, which of course is a motif in really all religion, but it has its own unique interpretation within the Sabbatean Kabbalah.
Right.
So yeah, we can scroll down and let's see. Yeah, here's a quote where this is the mystery of the turban. The serpent travels on a crooked path. Likewise, Mashiach must travel on a crooked path in order to rectify the universe. This was the path of Shabbatai Zvi. And this is the mystery of the turban. So he, the crooked serpent was a title that he would use, and he even signed his name. I wanted to post a picture of it on here, but it was so small I couldn't really get a good text of the photo of the book. But it basically, he signed his name as a serpent, kind of a coiling serpent, which is, other people like Cagliostro have signed their name as a serpent, and it's, that's an interesting theme. And now here you see below is these moths.
The Mothman.
Yeah, and I kind of have a unique interpretation of this that I'd like to share. This is not official dogma or anything. I mean, unless I just did a really good guess, but I was thinking about it in relation to the symbolism we discussed, and the moth, right? So the idea in the Lurianic Kabbalah is that, the Messiah comes from the deepest depths of the abyss. When the universe was created, the breaking of the vessels, this is so much to talk about, but I guess a nutshell version, no pun intended, would be like the world of shells is called the Kelly pot, right? And basically the world we live in is a mixture of the light and the shells, and basically everything we perceive in this world is cloaked in a shell, but it has its true essence of the divine spark that's within it. And the mystical path is all about liberating the divine sparks from the shells, releasing the sparks from the shells, gathering the sparks, kind of like in Mario, where you go around and you beat these shell dragons, right? These shell serpent monsters, and you get the spark that they were holding captive, right? And the ultimate fallen spark that's held captive is the Shekinah, which is the lost princess who fell with all of the sparks, because she's the divine mother who is, your mother never leaves your side. Your dad might, but so the mother fell into the abyss as well when all of this primordial catastrophe happened. So I was thinking about all that and like, why the moth? And a moth starts out as a worm, which is like a serpent, right? It's a serpentine animal, and it dwells in darkness. It begins its life in darkness, and then it forms a shell around itself, a cocoon, like literally a shell. And then it emerges from the shell as a winged being that seeks the light, right? That ascends towards the light. A moth gravitates towards the light, sometimes at its own peril, right? So I just thought that was really powerful. Like the previous image we showed of the ascending bird and the descending bird and the tree and the two serpents and everything. I feel like the moth captures that entire cycle perfectly, because it begins as this serpentine creature, builds a shell, emerges from the shell. Now it's an ascending creature that no longer dwells in darkness. It seeks the light. So that's just my interpretation, but I think it makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah. And this is a big symbol in Sabbatianism, is the moth. And I basically wrote what I just said under here, but if you go down a little bit more, and here's another quote. Jacob Frank spoke of initiation into this cult as being in the shape of like the letter V, like essentially in order to ascend, you have to descend. So it's, diving into the deepest depths of the abyss and then rising to the highest heights. Although one of the things that Sholem quotes is that most people didn't make it back up. A lot of people, and that's the risk of, descending into the deepest depths of the abyss. You might not make it back up.
And it's not even that controversial today. I mean, Jung and Joseph Campbell talk about going into the depths, mystery religions, even Gnosticism is, you go down into Hades and you face these demons, these evil things. Usually they're yourself or something you need to exercise, and then you come up a new being. But like you said, some people don't make it up. They enjoy, the drugs, sex, and rock and roll, right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, fortunately, some people can, but not everyone. So, And once again, Mario, like I was joking with you on the phone, that the M on Mario's hat stands for Mashiach, because he, not only is he battling these shell dragons, just like in the Kabbalah, the Kelly pot, the shells are symbolized as dragons that are holding the divine sparks captive. So it's just too on the nose. I have another post about that, but I just figured I'd throw it in there because I like to reference things in relation to stuff that people do know about. So I'm not just throwing all these words out there, and people can relate it to something. It's like, we all know about Mario, right? And I'll get into that later with the Wizard of Oz as well. But
ultimate Kabbalist game.
That's my Mario spiel. Yeah, I think it's don't get me started.
So this is part of their grave too, right? And
yes, and as you can see, this is another tomb where it has the planet Saturn clearly emphasized with these lines of descent from it with 13 stars. And there's other planets as well, Jupiter, and then, all of them, whatever. But there's a clear emphasis on Saturn because Sabbatai Zevi is Saturn. There's a messianic connotation with Saturn. Moshe Adel wrote a book. If you want to go deep into the Saturn connection with all this, look up Moshe Adel's book on the topic. There's a lot there that's very interesting to unpack. But just briefly, this is said to symbolize his followers, not necessarily his descendants. There's a lot of controversy about his descendants. Apparently his oldest son kind of rebuked it and whatnot, but these are his chief, followers that, obviously you can see they go into different paths, which makes sense because there are different ways of, not all of the Sabbateans do the same stuff. Like I said, there's certain ones that fully embrace Islam that join Sufi orders. There's certain ones that are fully secular and basically like worldly and atheistic and pretty modern. And so I think that image is pretty symbolic, but that does connect to the moth, sure enough, because there is a moth called the Saturni Pyri, I believe. It's not I think it was earlier, but there's a moth called the Saturni Pyri, and that is the moth apparently that they named it after. So in Hebrew it would be, the moth was called Sabbatai. So that was pretty fascinating, and that's from another scholar. I found that in his work. And here I just mentioned because I thought it was pretty interesting that the planet Saturn has these lines descending from it with 13 stars. Cause it's like, I oftentimes find that kind of the BS conspiracy theories kind of overlap with real stuff in ways that people don't even realize. Cause it's like people talk about, 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which is pretty unfounded, but sure enough, there are actually real 13 bloodlines that exist, like as it says here, the chosen families. So those are to represent the chosen families that are essentially under Sabbatai Zevi.
Very cool.
So that's pretty much it. This is just a little quote I put in about the great, so this is a good, it says Pharaoh is the great dragon.
Well, let's read this for the audience who will be listening in audio. The Messiah struggles in the depths of his soul to extract the sparks of the divine light from the embrace of the Kelepoth. Hence also the mystery of his suffering. He will subdue Pharaoh, the great dragon, but he is also himself the true Pharaoh and the holy serpent. He is locked in combat with the very principle that is his own metaphysical source, subduing it, but at times also subdued by it and falling into the bottomless abyss. His ultimate messianic task consists, apparently, not merely in the defeat and annihilation of the power of evil, but in raising it up to the spheres of holiness, that is, in the tikkun of the Kelepoth. Very cool. Yeah, that's well said.
And that's exactly what I was trying to explain earlier about it's a very slippery slope. It's not so black and white as we're taught in religion about the relationship between the divine and the other side, as it's called, the Sitra Akra or the Kelly pot, the shells. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, there's a very sort of intermixture, and it's like these two serpents are, like I said earlier, sometimes in combat, but sometimes identical as mirror images of each other. So
and you find that in Christianity. Was it Mircea Eliade who, I think it was his book, The Sacred and the Profane? In Latin, sacred and profane are the same word. So Jesus is also both sacred and profane, and it's a universal myth.
And that's just like in Islam, the Kaaba, the Black Cube in Mecca, is called Masjid al-Haram. and haram is also means
Haram.
like
Sin.
not like haram, like non-holy, like non-kosher. It's so
Right.
that's really interesting because it's like, and it has the connotation of it's don't put your hands on it, basically. It's like, but it's like the Kaaba is so holy that it's you know, sacred and kept separate, but then the stuff that's not is also used the same word, exactly like what you just said about the sacred and the profane. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, we got some pelvises.
I just threw that in there, a little sexual connotation with the butterfly. I don't,
Okay.
there's levels to this. So, I didn't even get into that, but just to make people give them
No, I
hints.
see it.
Yeah, I thought Elvis, Miguel. Elvis,
Yeah, so did I. Yeah, that's what he was called. He hated it. They called him the pelvis when he first came.
Yeah, exactly.
He was looking for those Kellipoth in the dressing room. I see. Elvis, let me be, from the song Grease. Get that pelvis far from me, Stockard Channing. So awesome. What okay, so this is great. Yeah, I love it. Where do you want to go next? We're on the serpent. Or Vince, do you have a question or remark while everything makes sense to you?
Oh, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm that's kind of, my head's reeling about, this evil is good, good is evil. And I wonder, I had the idea that maybe all these religions like, Judaism and Islam, even Christianity, they're like these organizations down below, but then there's these leaders up there that really don't follow them, that they're using these organizations. And so Sabbatai, Zebi, he was like, he ascended to the top of the leadership, see, as Messiah. And now it didn't matter if he was Islamic or Jewish or anything else like that. Now he was pulling the strings to all these different religions. And that's why it didn't matter. What do you think of that theory?
Absolutely. And a great example of that is Jonathan Eibeshitz, who's still highly respected Orthodox rabbi, but it's well known that he was a crypto-Sabbatean. His son, Wolf Eibeshitz, was a full-blown Frankist, also Freemason and involved in all sorts of stuff the following century. But it's funny because Jonathan Eibeshitz, there's certain Orthodox Jews who won't admit it because they're anti-Sabbatean and they consider him to be a holy figure, but it's undebatable among scholars. He was making amulets that had literally the name Sabbatai Zevi as the Messiah on them. He also wrote, he wrote this book called Va'avo. I won't say the full name because I don't want to mispronounce it, but basically, and on this day we came unto the spring. And scholars have determined that it was written by Eibeshitz because of there's just the writing style and all sorts of evidence, but it's one of the most bizarre Kabbalistic texts of all time, probably. In the Lurianic Kabbalah, we talk about Adam Kadmon and the body of God and whatnot, and we're going to get into that with the Wizard of Oz stuff about sort of the Shir Kaman, like the body of God as a limited being that's under the Ein Sof, which is beyond body, beyond title, beyond anything. Yeah. And but yeah, he, there's a quote, I forget from who, one of the scholars said, the Zohar is, or no, okay, so it's like the Kabbalah is romantic, the Zohar is romantic, the Sabbatean Kabbalah is pornographic. It's like there's a lot of erotic symbolism in the Zohar and in Kabbalah, Lurianic Kabbalah, about God and the Shekinah in their embrace and wanting to unite them sexually, and even having the sex act on earth be a microcosm of that triggers that in the heavens above. And that's a big part of Kabbalah, which is pretty interesting. Like I said about the hint of the pelvis bone earlier, so, but yeah, this book Va'avo is it goes really deep into it, all sorts of bizarre, not only the body of God, but the urine of God and all crazy stuff, the semen that gets in the urine. It's just bizarre stuff. And that was written by Jonathan Eibeshitz, who's highly regarded Orthodox rabbi. So that just, was triggered by your point, Vance, about people who are viewed as Orthodox religious figures, but secretly are involved in these secret societies. What I think that's true of all religions at this point.
The first rule of Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Which is the one? Yeah, there
I
was.
just realized you have the occult Elvis on your bookshelf. That's hilarious. I didn't even connect the dots just now. But wow, okay.
It's secret. It's all a big secret.
It's hidden
man.
in plain sight.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's our secret Ion Bike Club, right? The Elvis.
All right, you want to go to the Wizard of Oz or to the Ophites?
Snakes.
Yeah, let's get this.
As long as they're snakes.
The Ophites, basically, I don't have like a full post on that. I just wanted, if you could pull that image up, I just wanted to show that I'm sure your listeners have heard of the Ophites. They're one of the primary Gnostic heresies. And, technically, like, can we say that the scholastic dogma is that Kabbalah was started in the 12th and 13th centuries in Spain, and with like the Bahir being the first text, Sefer Yetzirah, Zohar, and all that. The people who practice it and believe in it would argue that it goes back, that it's primordial, and that Adam was given the Kabbalah by God, and whatever. And I just think I tend to believe that it is ancient, and this, I think, is one of the great proofs of that. This is the Ophite diagram. I should have looked up the date on this, but it's definitely back in the old days of the Gnostic heresies, way before
late second, early third. Celsus and Origen both have the map, and
exactly. There you
there.
go. So, but yeah, basically we have 10 spheres, and speaking of the serpent, these are basically different emanations of spheres, but here you have the Leviathan surrounding the spheres. This is something that, there's references all throughout Kabbalistic literature, and even more ancient Semitic mythology. It talks about this great dragon, this great sea dragon. In fact, even Tiamat, Raphael Patai made the point that Tiamat, that tohu, the word for chaos used in the Bible, is etymologically rooted in Tiamat, which is the ancient Babylonian chaos serpent, which I thought that was a crazy connection, but it does make sense. It says in the beginning of Genesis, tohu vabohu, formless void and chaos. That's what existed before the universe was created. So the idea that in some myths, the creator kills the dragon or the Leviathan and creates the universe out of its body. In some myths, it still exists on the edges of the universe, and actually the universe exists within it. It's like a Ouroboros serpent biting its own tail. In reality, as we know it, exists within the boundaries of the Leviathan, which is clearly depicted on this, where all the heavenly spheres are surrounded by the Leviathan. And that reminds me of one more point I wanted to say about the moth. One of the earliest Kabbalistic texts, called Treatise on Dragons by Nathan of Gaza, who was basically the original Sabbatean prophet, the one who declared Sabbatai Zebedee to be the Messiah. He talks about the moth, and he points out, so it goes back before the Don Metums were ever created. Wow. They were talking about the moth in the very beginning with Nathan of Gaza. And he points out that the Hebrew word for moth, I don't have this in my notes right now, but I guess it doesn't matter what the actual gematria is. But basically, it has the same numerical value as Leviathan. So, the fin of Leviathan. So the idea, there's another myth that says the universe is dangling from a fin of Leviathan. So all these things kind of allude to this dragon that's just so great and so chaotic. And it's like even modern science talks about, chaos before order and whatnot. So basically it's just the idea that chaos came before order. In the Kabbalah, they say the shell precedes the fruit. Evil essentially comes before good. The abyss existed before the world was created out of those primordial waters. It's like Genesis doesn't actually say that God created water. It implying that the primordial waters already existed, and that this was pulled out of that chaotic abyss and brought into a ordered form, which is essentially what this is depicting. And especially the 10 spheres at the bottom, with just like the 10 Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. And just like it says Leviathan on top of the middle diagram, the bottom diagram has Behemoth. on the bottom, which is basically another primordial monster, but it's associated with the land, the behemoth. And I just want to throw this out there. This is another theory of mine, but everyone debates about the origin of Baphomet coming from Muhammad or coming from this anagram of Sophia or something. But and that's all interesting. But I haven't heard anyone else say this, but I kind of wonder if it comes from behemoth. Bahamut is pretty similar, and it kind of makes sense as a depiction of basically the beast, right? So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And yes, for the audience, the Ophites were known as, they were one of the serpent Gnostics. They obviously believe that Sophia or Jesus, or basically, I think in there, Sophia was the serpent in the garden. The serpent, Moses lifting up the serpent in the desert. The serpent was a holy figure, excuse me, in their mythology. And then one church father says that during the rituals, they would congregate and a serpent would come out of a tunnel and they would kiss the serpent, each one of them in the mouth. So it was very important, like the Essenes, this power, this energy, if you would. And even better, and I think you'll like this one, is that in her new book, April DeConnick talks about how this idea of the Ophite Gnosticism wasn't even these Christians, but it started with Jews in the first century. A lot of Jews in Alexandria were starting to rewrite Genesis and making the serpent into a divine being and the Son of Man into a cosmic force and all this other stuff. And it was up in the air in the first century with the Jews. Obviously, with the destruction of the temple and the war in the second century, everything got disrupted, and these Gnostics continued this sort of serpent worship, if you would. So you're right on that one. Kabbalah might have started, again, in the first century with these Egyptian Jews.
Exactly. And I finished this book just in time because I thought, it's too related to what we're talking about. And sure enough, Sholem also says that Ophites got a lot of their doctrines from the Jews at the time. So he doesn't say that about everything, but there are specific things that he says are proven to be of Jewish origin in the Ophite cult. So there you go.
They were going for the serpent. They were going left-hand path already. And then Leviathan. I always think of Hellraiser 2. Leviathan, Lord of the Labyrinth. Cool. So so it's important to know, this sort of genealogy with the Ophite tradition and the Gnostic Ophites, and they continued it. And there's a good chance this eventually would get to probably Knights Templar, Manichaeans. The Manichaeans always said Jesus was the serpent in the garden. You know what I mean? And it probably went to Europe in those areas.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good segue into the Wizard of Oz, what I just said about, since we talked about the Baphomet, Oz literally means goat in Hebrew. It also means power or strength. But my most recent post is breaking that down. So
let me find it.
Could I get away with a quick bathroom break? I hate to.
Of course, for sure. In fact, while you do that, I might even talk about. I'll talk about one of our sponsors. Yeah, go to the bathroom.
Awesome.
Give me a chance to talk about one of my sponsors. And yes, we do have a sponsor from Gnosis, and that is our friend and contributor at the Finding Hermes, Anon Omos. And he wrote a book which he sold very well at the conference a couple of weeks ago, Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10. It was written by a self-recovered schizophrenic who goes by the pseudonym of Anon Omos. During his time as a schizophrenic, he underwent Gnostic and shamanic experiences while enduring months of existential challenges. At times, he felt Christ-like, and other times being dragged through the darkest depths of hell. Hidden within its contents are mysteries, riddles, and breadcrumbs toward Gnosis as it provides glimpses into the universe's magic. It is not for the faint-hearted and will assist with your soul's adventure and the hero's journey, just like the Kabbalah. Understanding that there are multiple true paths to the Godhead, the genuine ones are paved with love, forgiveness, compassion, and gratitude. Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10 is a useful introductory manual for making the most of our visit here. It is a roadmap and travel guide for the thinking in terms of eternity, navigating around the archons, and finding lodging among the aeons. And I would pull it up, but I've got all these screens for screen sharing, so I can't. But I will have Anon's book in the show notes, so check his book out. And again, we had a great time with him at the Gnosis. So that is the sponsor I have today. Again, looking for some other housekeeping. Any questions from the audience or yourself, Vance? Not that Dan can answer. Oh, he's back.
He's
Thank God he
back.
didn't take the microphone into the bathroom like the Naked Gun. So that's good.
Yeah, the cordless mic.
Yeah. All right. So he's getting back. And the audience is doing good. Again, good shows coming in September, including shows on the Divine Feminine, shows on the paradox of language, some Gnostic shows on shadow work. Yeah, just excellent stuff coming on Aeon Byte in September. All right, so you are back, and I need to find that. I need to find the Wizard of Oz. We're off to see the wizard. Where's that back button?
That's appropriate, the wizard,
There you go.
Wiz.
Everything's
secret. Okay, I've got here the Secret of Oz. Let me pull it up. Where is it? At the stage. All right, we got the wizard here. Migdal Oz, the Tower of Power. Let us know about this blog post.
So I'm basically breaking down the symbolism of the Wizard of Oz. I'm not claiming that this was like secretly intentional. I mean, you never know, but I think it's, it can be deeper than that, synchronicity, whatever you want to call it. But there are some remarkable, and I know you guys have talked about, I actually found your episode about the Wizard of Oz, and I watched the first half of it just the other day when I was looking at your channel. So I would love to hear anything that adds on to this. But yeah, this is basically just sort of a Kabbalistic breakdown of the movie. So Oz is a Hebrew word. That means, Hebrew is a polysemous language where a lot of words have double, triple, multiple meanings, or whatever you want to call it. So it means strength. That's the commonly, if you read the scholarship on Migdal Oz, which means the Tower of Oz, which was Sabbatai Zevi's headquarters at one point. They'll say it means the Tower of Strength, or I say Power Tower because it rhymes, but that, it does also mean goat. And, these are the most advanced Kabbalists in the world. They're certainly aware of the double meaning. I mean, there's no way that they weren't aware of that, even if power was the intended meaning. Now, sure enough, Migdal has a gematria of 77, as does Oz, and that's also probably another reason they named it that. Both of those words have a gematria of 77, and that was sort of the messianic headquarters. And as I said, it's also interesting because the largest messianic movement in the world today, Chabad Lubavitch, their headquarters is called 770. So there's an association with 77 as a sort of the headquarters of the Messiah. I don't know why they, if that's connected. I'm just threw it in there. But so basically people would come from all around the world to Migdal Oz to see Sabbatai Zevi and to receive blessings, and kind of like the Wizard of Oz, they're off to see the wizard, and he was considered the greatest magician of all time. He was the Messiah, right? And so people would come, and just like in the Wizard of Oz, I have this struggle, I have this, and this actually comes from the Lurianic Kabbalah, where these masters will, they'll give you the what's the word, the tikkun of your soul, of what exactly your path is, the rectification, often based on like a Kabbalistic breakdown of your name or your life story or whatever. And people would go to these Lurianic Kabbalists even before this time period in sort of a way of like to heal their whatever they're struggling with, so yeah, I just thought that was a fun parallel, because he was there were at one point thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of people saying we're going to Oz to receive blessings and fix our problems, so that's kind of like the movie.
Yeah, but that's interesting because Frank Baum obviously was a theosophist, but I guess as a theosophist he'd have a good grasp of Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Freeman, everything.
Well, and Oz, even people that aren't aware of like the Sabbatean Kabbalah, there's Aleister Crowley talked about Oz. He has a book called Liber Oz. We're going to get to that shortly in this post, but he could have been exposed to it from other places.
In those days,
yeah. So anyway, the Big Brother, this is another thing that kind of reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. Jacob Frank, who was the penultimate Sabbatean leader in the 1700s, sort of a different era than what we've talked about so far. But he talked a lot about the Big Brother behind the screen, and that there's this curtain that separates, the spiritual world from this world, and that, he had access to both sides of the curtain, but, his followers didn't. And he was promising them, like, I'm going to get you on the other side of this curtain where you'll receive eternal life and all this stuff. And there's another, I think I put it at the bottom, but another quote about the idea of God existing behind a curtain. We'll get to it at the end, but it's from the earlier, much older Kabbalistic and even the Merkava traditions, which is the pre-Kabbalah, although I'm kind of arguing that it's an unbroken lineage the whole time, right. But, that's the narrative, is that before the Kabbalah, there was the Merkava mystics, which was the original form of Jewish mysticism. And they talked about God existing behind a curtain. So that's just another, symbolic parallel. Here, I put some quotes. This is from a book by Jay Michelson, who I would say is a jabroni, but he did write a really good book about Jacob Frank. And I do recommend it just because it's kind of the most simple introduction to it. But he says that God was, that the Sabbateans, I guess it's not on this part, but basically that the Sabbateans viewed God as a powerful sorcerer or wizard rather than like a transcendent being. And so I just included those quotes. Even another thing,
that's
Shaddai,
Philip K. Dick said that. Yeah, he said the demiurge was a mad magician.
Yeah, exactly. So... and here, Jacob Frank, another controversial thing he said, one of the Hebrew names of God that I believe was first introduced when God revealed himself to Abraham, but don't quote me on that, but it's definitely one of the divine names of God in the Torah and the Kabbalah is Shaddai. And Jacob Frank said that, that word is Shin Dalet Yud, which the Hebrew word for demon is Shin Dalet. So he was essentially saying that Shaddai is like the Lord of the demons. This is sort of a left-hand path. And for the record, I'm not claiming that this is what Judaism is about at all. This is a very heretical thing that, Orthodox, that most Jews want no parts of. Just, I don't want to get too much into disclaimers, but let me just throw that out there.
Kind of Gnostic though, right?
Very much so. Exactly. So here's, there's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. It almost looks like the two serpents in front of him, but I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. One of the great lines.
I think it's made to look like the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, wow. You know what? Yeah, the two cherubim facing each other. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Wow. I need a moment of silence for that. That's
Vance knows too much. They're gonna go after him.
I never even thought of that. Oh gosh. So the word Oz itself. Let's get into the actual word. The word Ayin Zion. Ayin has a value of 70. Zion has a value of 7. And these words also rhyme, which most letters don't rhyme in Hebrew. I don't know if any other two letters particularly rhyme, but so there's kind of a mystical connection because they're 7 and 70, and those two words combined has a value of 77, and it's just associated with essentially magical power, which is associated with the phallic lust of the goat. That's why it also means goat, and we have this connection between the goat and sort of masculine phallic blind lust or whatever you want to call it, not only in the occult, but even just in horny goat weed. It's just, I don't know, it's like it's a thing, that. So, and I actually have a quote from Albert Pike. I pulled from quite a few diverse sources on this one, where he talks about that. We'll get to that in a moment. This is from Aleister Crowley's book, 777, where as that very bottom word there is Oz, he-goat. These are basically all the words, all the words he published in that book that have the value of 77, which, as you can see, also includes Tower, Migdal. And then, yeah, the next section is Oz Le Elohim. This was one of the early Sabbatean tracts that this picture is pretty fascinating. But I know this is largely audio as well, so I won't get too much into the visuals. But Oz Le Elohim is essentially one of the primary Sabbatean books where they talked about the difference between the God that they worship and the root source of the universe, or of Ein Sof, as it's called in Kabbalah, basically admitting that they do worship a lower God, but also claiming that they should, because essentially Ein Sof is so far and so separate from this realm that it's a lost cause. He doesn't care. There's no agenda that's beyond any type of yes or no's you can think of. So they do worship the demiurge essentially on purpose, and they know it's the demiurge, and they know that there's a God above that, but they still believe that the demiurge is the source of power and who they should be worshiping, and who all of their magical rites and whatnot are.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that. Yeah, secret societies want to deal with Saturn or Mithras, these powerhouse gods, or the Brotherhood of Saturn. They're like, we know he's the demiurge, but we want to play nice with Tony Soprano because he runs the show. So we'll just deal with him.
Yeah, the Brotherhood of Saturn. I have some unpublished posts about that, and I've heard your show about that. That's another fascinating topic. And just to briefly mention, it's that kind of demiurgic Saturn worship is not. The Brotherhood of Saturn, you could even argue, is like a proto-Nazi group, and even their stuff centers around Saturn. So I'm just kind of pointing that out to show how broad this is, and that it's not just this one thing. It's kind of a recurring theme. So pretty interesting. Yeah. The correlation between Saturn and the demiurge, which the Sabbateans seem to pretty much embrace and acknowledge. So
since they were Lurianic, they still would think that the Ein Sof is the ultimate divinity, right?
Absolutely. And they
that's where you want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if they wanted to get to it. I mean, they were just like the metaphor that Miguel Cardozo uses is that worshiping Ein Sof would be like worshiping the soil that a tree grows out of. Worshiping the demiurge would be like worshiping the tree that gives you the fruit. Right. It's like, which one's going to give you the fruit? The soil, yes, the tree comes from the soil, but it's not. You're not going to get any fruit from the soil unless you praise the tree. So that's their perspective on it.
Nice try, dude. Nice try, Miguel. This other Miguel. Nice.
Yeah, right.
Ein Sof's not going to talk to you, give you anything or whatever, but it's a demiurge that screws around the world.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Right?
I'm just saying.
But you got to worship him. You got to worship him. You got to bow down to him. So,
well, if that's the source of power, I mean, they pulled it off apparently. So yeah, that was an early Sabbatean text called Oz Le Elohim, where I just, I thought I wanted to include that because essentially the connection I'm trying to make between this sort of false God behind the curtain as a distinct from the true God, they illustrate that. Of course, they glorify it and they argue for it, but even that book starts with the word Oz. So that's just an interesting connection. Now, much later, in the Gentile world, Aleister Crowley wrote a book called Liber Oz, and he was certainly embracing the goat connection and the idea of lust and power, and the book Liber Oz is just the similarity between Crowley and the Sabbateans, aside from all the left-hand path stuff, obviously, in the antinomianism, is that they were both declaring a sort of a new aeon. And I don't honestly take Crowley even seriously. I just include it because I know he's more popular and people might get the reference. But it is kind of interesting. Sabbatai Zevi's name has a value of 814, and they use, and I think even Shaddai in its full spelling has a gematria. It does have a gematria of 814, and several other words do. So they that was kind of their slogan when they were declaring their new aeon. And then when Crowley declared his new aeon, it was 418, which is a permutation in Kabbalah. That's considered to be connected if they contain the same numbers reversed. And you could even argue that he was sort of the Cliffothic reflection and of what the Frankists were doing, or the whatever. I mean, that's all speculation and just whatever. I almost didn't include that part, but whatever. Another thing Crowley points out that's interesting is that Pan has a numerical value of 131, which is the numerical value of Samael, who is, the Gnostics would say, is the demiurge. The Kabbalists would say is, the devil. Pan, Pe, Aleph, Nun adds up to 131. And he drew that connection, which is fascinating because here we're talking about Oz as the goat, as essentially the devil, and as the negative use of the sex drive. And so that's pretty fascinating because, the Greeks depicted Pan as a goat, right? And also sort of a demiurge because Pan means all. Right. So it's like, even though he was not the ultimate God, he was sort of the God of nature, the God of this world. So that's a fun connection.
Mr. Albert Pike, the Book of Words.
Yeah, here's a quote from Albert Pike that I included just to show, that this stuff comes from all these different parts of the occult world, that it's acknowledged. He says, could you just scroll back up just for a second so I can read the Pike quote? We here see then the image of the great deity whom the Greeks confounded with their Pan because the Egyptians had chosen for his emblem a goat, an animal which to Hor Apollo was the symbol of generation of fecundity. See, that's another thing, the Egyptian goat of Mendes, which actually, did I write about this? I did. Herodotus wrote about his travels to the Egyptian city of Mendes that essentially worshiped this goat deity. And, even Eliphas Levi, when he drew the Baphomet, said that it was the goat of Mendes. So this tradition, that association has existed for a long time. And he essentially said that in these temples of Pan or Mendes, people would have sex with goats. And that's pretty much what the witches' Sabbath was supposedly in the medieval times. So I just thought that was fascinating that this ancient pre-Christian Egyptian Greek era stuff had that same connotation that, here in the medieval times, they talk about the witches' Sabbath, where these women, fornicate with the goat to summon the devil. And then, then Crowley talking about it later and all the Oz stuff. I just think there's really something here that's worth looking at. And of course there is a connection between Saturn and the goat, because astrologically speaking, the sign of Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, Capricorn being the goat. Yeah. So it overlaps.
Ooh, very good. Because the Ophites, one of their stargates was through Capricorn. And they wanted to overcome the great Archon Saturn. They saw him as, the bad guy.
The demiurge, right?
Yeah. Wow. And they had some great spells. You would, every time you go up a level, you meet the Archon. You name the Archon, and then you tell him, but I do not belong here. That's really their prayer. My home is in the light. And the Archon would be like, all right, buddy, you can come through.
A password, open sesame.
Yeah. It wasn't anything complicated. It's just, I don't belong here and I know your name. That's it.
And that's exactly what the Merkava tradition talks about as well. You have a password for these archons and you go through the seven heavens. And if you know the passwords, they'll let you by. If you don't, you might be screwed. And that's, once again, a connection between the Ophites and the Merkava tradition, which is the pre-Kabbalah. So it all
and the Wizard of Oz. Remember when they had to give the password to get into the city?
Yeah, that's true. To see
there
the
wizard. Go.
Yeah.
See, there you go.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the Ophites because according to Origen, when they would come down, they would gain the power of this Archon. Now, scholars think they were just wearing costumes in these elaborate mystery religions. But in the Ophites, you overcome the power, you become that Archon. You have their power down here on Earth. So it's very interesting, and I think Origen said their rituals were very similar to that of Mithras. We don't know, but that's what the ancients saw. These Gnostics and Mithraics, this sort of going up the stars and overcoming these animal-headed beings. So
that's amazing. That's very just like the Merkava tradition. At the very final level, it doesn't say well. I haven't, I don't know all about it, but from what I do know, they would subdue God after reaching the final heaven. And it's not, it's funny because once they did what they did when they subdued God was they measured all his limbs and his nostrils and his nose and his arms and hands and teeth, and that's what the Hekhalot literature is based, or the Shir Kama, the Shir Kama, which is basically the measure of the body of God. And those numbers apparently have mystical connotations of like gematria or whatever else the case may be, the ratios between them, obviously not literal, but they would, after passing through these 7 heavens, they would approach the throne of God, which was also behind a curtain, which was said to protect the initiate or the mystic from being destroyed by the gaze of God. But if we're taking a Gnostic approach, sort of a Wizard of Oz approach, you could argue that it's to protect the demiurge from the site, from getting the curtain pulled back and realize that he's not the true king of the universe.
Right, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just, if you could scroll back up just a little bit past this picture I included of the Pan. I just wanted to mention, speaking of Pan and the goat, Pan is also the Polish word for Lord, which is what Jacob Frank used as his title. Though his writings or his sayings are documented as the words of the Lord, and Pan is the word used for that. Panna being the feminine version that he used for his daughter Eva Frank, who was supposed to be the true feminine Messiah, the incarnation of the goddess. But yeah, once again, did he know that Pan has the same? He's more of a Kabbalist than I am, so I'm sure he thought of it. If Pan Pei Aleph Nun, 3 letters, he in Hebrew, he knew that Samael is 131. So I don't know, man. He does talk about Samael. He claims that Samael is who gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, and that
But Paul says that too in Galatians, said angels gave Moses the Torah. And you're wondering, is Paul saying something's off? And it also says there was a veil across Moses's eyes. He was misguided. That's what the Gnostics said too, that somebody fooled Moses, or these bad angels gave him the Torah. And even Paul seems to, Paul is like, in Paul's letter, the angels are not good guys, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So yeah, there's something. Obviously, he was pulling from a very known tradition. It wasn't mainstream, but it was mainstream during the times of Christ, but not when he was around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
All right. So we continue. Let's go past it. I get nervous when I see this picture.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can. Understandable. Azza and Azael. These are essentially two, essentially the fallen angels who gave birth to the Nephilim, according to the Kabbalistic traditions. They always appear together, Azza and Azael. Of course, the root of Oz being goat. They're depicted here. I have a quote from a treatise on the left emanation, which is one of the earliest Kabbalistic texts, all about the left side and the Sitra Achra, the Kelly pot. And this quote is from that text, where he says, talking about Azza and Azael, who sometimes are mentioned as together as Azazel, such as the scapegoat ritual of Yom Kippur. It's just called Azazel, but it's the same concept. Some take the form of he and she goats. From these are Azza and Azael. Each separately has the form of an image of real men. When they fell from heaven, a part of the above mentioned ether, they donned the power of this ether just above, and they took on the bodies of men. Then the upper power weakened and received the lower power. But the progeny which issued from them was more towering and powerful than all of mankind. Mm-hmm. I wonder if the words tower and power were also Migdal and Oz. I don't know. I just thought of that. But so that's, not to get too conspiratorial, but the idea that the fallen angels have the bodies of men and rule the world, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that isn't, David Icke did not come up with that. It's it does root in the Kabbalah, So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah. You definitely, for those of you out there, you need to check out his blog, because you'll need to reread it and read it. And of course, his blog is swimpool.blog. Yeah, very esoteric and occult name. Swimpool.blog. Yeah, my God.
Yeah, swim is an acronym for someone who isn't me, which, I came up with that in 2017, because I was kind of going through a rebirth, and I wanted to I'm like, this isn't even what you know me as. So that's, as you can see, it says swim. I mean, my name is John, but I just put swim in the thing because that's for fun. Here's another book or another quote from Albert Pike. Well, this I don't know what that Hebrew word is. Symbolized the state of erection of the membrum virile when prepared for begetting or creating. So he's talking about the phallus once again as Oz. In the womb symbolized the potency of vigor and fierce and even cruel desire of the same member. It was the sexual vigor and power, the inordinate lust of the goat, that gave that animal the name Oz. So they named the goat Oz, which already meant power or strength because of its sexual vigor. And as he says, even cruel desire of the same member or phallus. So yeah, there you go.
Is that Yahweh? Is that Yahweh, that first Jewish word there?
It's Yod Kaf Yod Nun, which I don't know what that means. So, okay. And then but the other one, oh no, it's Yakin. Oh, my bad. He's talking about Yakin and Boaz. Okay, here we go. Because of course it's Albert Pike, so he's talking about Freemasonry, Yakin and Boaz. The one below it, when he's talking about the womb, is Boaz, which is Oz with a B in front of it. So Boaz and then Yakin. So he's saying that Yakin and Boaz, which are the two pillars, in the entry to Solomon's temple, which in Masonry is a significant part of their symbolism. Yakin and Boaz. Yeah.
Oh wow, I subscribe to this guy's channel. That's hilarious.
Yeah, he has some good stuff. I follow all sorts of
since the war started, he's gotten a little shrill, but I love his Kabbalah takes are amazing.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And I'm happy I found this one. He's talking about, you can check this out on my blog. We won't play it, but basically he's can you just go up to the caption again?
Sure.
I just want to remember what so he's talking about basically in normative Judaism, the part where the goat would appear in a way that is not occulted at all is in the scapegoat ritual, which is Yom Kippur, where once again the sort of black and white Christian idea of God and the devil is not, it's more nuanced in Judaism, and they essentially bribe Azazel or Samael by giving it a sacrifice of the goat. And then they essentially let that goat free into the desert, which is symbolic of the abyss. And it's essentially a bribe to Satan to not persecute them for their sins. You could argue that Jesus is somewhat based on the scapegoat, the idea of taking on the sins of Israel and dying for it. And, then they also sacrifice a goat to God, to Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh. And they actually sacrifice that one in the temple, as opposed to the one that's allowed to escape into the desert, which is for the devil. And essentially the idea is it's like you throw a dog a bone. If you're getting attacked by a wild dog, you throw it a bone and it will leave you alone, and it's like that's what the scapegoat's all about, is rather than ignoring the devil and just no, it's like, no, we acknowledge that you have power in this world and it exists. Here's a freaking goat for you, and leave us alone. Like, that's basically what it is. And that gets pretty deep as well. So there's a clip of the rabbi explaining that in more detail if you're interested.
He's got a great channel.
Yeah. Now the word Gaza, to bring it up to some current events.
Oh boy.
Gaza comes from Azaz, to be strong, which is Oz. So the root word of Gaza is Oz. And of course, Nathan of Gaza was the first Sabbatean prophet. And he talked about Gaza as having a significant role in the apocalyptic process, and he, of course, they were big on the concept of Oz, the Tower of Oz, and all that. Nathan of Oz. And here I show the etymology that word does come from Oz. So I just thought that was a fun connection. And below I have a clip of another rabbi, Daniel Gladstein, where he talks about, this is a video. I think it's called, he has some really interesting stuff. I think it's called A Kabbalistic Analysis of the Gaza Situation or something. It was published years ago, but he breaks down that Gaza, I think in its full spelling, there's different types of gematria. Sometimes you spell out the full letters, but essentially he breaks down that Gaza has a gematria of 131 once again, and he connects it to Samael, which of course he's saying that from a perspective of, these are the enemies of the Jews, so they're under Samael, but Gaza comes from the word Oz, has a ordinal gematria of 131. So that's, I just included that because why not? You know, it's just crazy how all this stuff interconnects so much. You know?
Yeah. So, very cool. What an excellent article and an excellent journey. Events, is there a couple of super
I think
chats?
There's a couple things.
Yes, they are.
Well,
we have from Occult Examiner. What did the Ophites think of women?
Charles King said that they hated women in his book, The Gnostics and Their Remains. I would doubt that because unlike other religions, you had mixed genders. And even in like the Nassenes, the other serpent Gnostics, they were founded by Miriam, who was a disciple of James the Just. And in all these Gnostic groups, men and women were allowed to mingle and often take positions. So, and with the Ophites, you have the Supreme Mother is the Holy Spirit, and she gives birth to Sophia. To Sophia, but she also gives birth to Christ too. So there's a lot of divine feminine with the Ophites and Nassenes, and of course the serpent is ultimately it's androgynous, but it kind of leans towards the feminine. So I would have to read the book to see more, unless I'm missing something. But thanks for the super chat. Another one, Vance. Let's see. Has your guest ever read any books from Daniel C. Met? I have interviewed. I love Daniel C. Met. I read several of his books. I wish I could get a hold of his Pritzker edition of the Zohar.
I'm working my way through the Pritzker edition of the Zohar. You know, as we speak, it's a pretty big book. It's about this wide. It's 12 volumes, I believe, the Pritzker one. And I've read the first couple volumes of that on my way into the third. So I've been studying that as I go.
Yeah. The Pritzker family, a very wealthy family.
Yes,
one of their guys bought himself the governorship here, corrupt, but they do throw a lot of money into these kind of ancient studies and Jewish study and other studies too. So at least you got to give them that, I suppose.
And another family that puts a lot of money into these studies is the Warburg family, who they not only funded Moshe Adel's book about Saturn and the Kabbalah, but they also funded another book that's not Kabbalistic called Saturn and Melancholy, which is very fascinating. I have a copy of that that I need to read, but it's talking about the idea of Saturn and its association with melancholy more in the classical, traditions. And so I was like, what's with these Warburgs and Saturn stuff? And, even the book I was just reading by Sholem, he mentions that he was, talking to scholars from the Warburg Society. And, I've looked into it, and it's not like they only talk about that. I mean, they cover a ton of stuff, but the Warburgs are involved in the process of sort of uncovering this information and bringing it to light, just like the Pritzkers are. So that's interesting to note.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always hope they would make a movie about Shabbatai Zevi, but they won't. There'll be too much pushback. Just like there's never, as we were talking at Astronosis, there's never been a movie about Madame Blavatsky. She was just like Zevi. She was huge. She changed culture and history, and is one of the main first feminists, one of those culture moving, history changing women that they have. She started a global religion, but you'll never get a movie for her or Zevi or some of the other cool cats out
now there is a Cagliostro movie. He's definitely a cool cat, and that movie is really fascinating, actually. I think it's on YouTube for free. So
wow, yeah. I mean, and obviously there's a movie about Gurdjieff, Jack Parsons, but yeah, I mean, Zevi and Blavatsky are just they're a much higher level. They were global figures. But.
Yeah.
Oh well, so this is the world we live in, the world of Saturn and his limits. All right. This has been great. Do you want to check out Mario next, or what do you?
There was a couple of things at the very end of the Oz post that I wanted to just briefly mention, just to kind of hammer it in. I think I pretty much covered it.
Let's hammer this baby in.
And then I think, here's pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. But then I also have some references to the Lurianic Kabbalah talking about Oz as well. Here's a quote from Sholem. We don't need to read it, but basically what I said earlier about the idea of God being behind a curtain. But yeah, here, this Kabbalah Online, I believe this is from Pardes Rimonim, which is a significant Kabbalistic text from Moshe Cordovero. So anyway, so in the Lurianic Kabbalah, there's the Dukes of Edom, the 7 kings of Edom, which is, just like in the Matrix, it says this matrix has been created before, but it wasn't right, so we destroyed it. That's also a Kabbalistic concept. Essentially, these 7 kings of Edom were the spheres that existed before the creation of the universe. They were imperfect. They cannot contain the light of God that was emanating, and so they broke and shattered, and those broken vessels fell into the abyss and were enwrapped by the kelipot, or the shells. And that's why in this world, everything is hidden behind a shell. And the things with the thickest shells are said to have the brightest sparks. And that's kind of what got the Sabbateans into their whole idea of, kind of embracing the dark side and extracting the sparks from it. But yeah, like Mario, just like you're getting the sparks back from the shells, back from the dragons, back from the kelipot, But these 7 vessels are symbolized by these 7 letters. If you could scroll up just a hair, I think it's well, anyway, yeah. So Shin, Ayin, Tet, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Zadik. These can be made to spell 3 words. The Shin, Tet, Nun, it spells Satan. The Ayin, Zayin spells Oz. And the Gimel Tzadi spells gates, so basically this is translated as the strength and mighty power of the insolent states of judgment, which descended and became Satan, the forces of evil. So here you have, not only in the beginning of the universe, but the pre-universe in Lurianic Kabbalah, the idea of Oz, the connection between Oz and Satan as essentially what ended up becoming the side of evil in our current universe. So I just thought that was really fascinating to throw in there. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. Anyway, yeah, check it out. Okay, where is Mario?
The Mario, I think I covered that. I don't really have any specific
I'm back to the main
references other than what I said already. But even like Mario's a plumber, he's like, you're fixing the flow of water, it's like, I don't know, you could get schizo with it if you want, but I think, yeah, basically you're gathering the sparks, you're gathering the fallen sparks from
but he is Italian. But what did Tony Soprano said? Italians are just Jews with better food. That was
that's hilarious. I do actually have a post on there as well that talks about the Italian connection to the Sabbateans.
Let us know real quick if you want.
If you want to get into that, I wasn't planning on doing that post, but yeah, it's called The Geopolitics of Sabbatai Zevi, where the king of Italy, Charles Edward III, I believe, who is considered like the father of fascism. He was the one that brought Mussolini to power and everything. And he had a meeting with Theodor Herzl, the father of modern Zionism. And he told Theodor Herzl, my ancestors conspired with Sabbatai Zevi. Now, the implications of that are very significant. Not only is he acknowledging that these modern movements are descendants of, Sabbateanism, but also that this affiliation has gone on for centuries. And so he used the word conspire. He told Herzl, like when they're meeting, he's like, oh, this isn't the first time my ancestors conspired with Zevi. And he's, of course, Italian king. And then the author Bezalel Noir, he says that Yakini, one of the main Sabbatean families, was with the name Yakini, which people assumed was Hebrew, but then he's like, that honestly sounds like more of an Italian name, so maybe there was an Italian connection in the Sabbatean movement all along, and maybe that's what King Edward was alluding to when he told Herzl that. But yeah, that's a post worth clicking on as well. I highlight the text that I found that in, and there's some pretty interesting stuff in there. So
wow, your research is amazing. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I just see another super chance. Thank you very much, Dissident Jones.
Mushroom.
One up. Thank you.
That's the Mario thing, right? The mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate the support. And yeah, people in the chat are really enjoying it. Go ahead. A lot of people are talking about Nagas, and I'm like, we won't get to the Asia this episode. Maybe another one.
It just shows how universal it is, though. I mean, even the serpents in
Right.
American mythology, it's like, yeah, it's all over the place. But yeah. So I do have the post on Mario. I also have one on Zelda, which doesn't go as deep, but so basically, aside from the gathering the lost sparks from the Kelly pot, there's also the Shekinah, who's, the divine feminine, the holy goddess in Kabbalah, just like Sophia in Gnosticism. She is held captive in the abyss by these Kelly pot, by these shell dragons, just like in Mario. And Zelda is also about rescuing the lost princess from the forces of evil, right? And I talk about Rabbi Nachman's tale, The Lost Princess, which is just a slightly more modern rendition of this ancient motif. But an interesting thing is that Sabbatai Zevi, he was actually very musical. What you were saying about his sort of manic depressive, I mean, I kind of relate to him too. And he was also very musical. And his favorite song was called Meli Zelda, which is a Spanish opera. And he was obsessed with that song. And he said it was about the Shekinah. And Meli Zelda. So Zelda, the princess, the goddess that's held captive in the Kelly pot, being called Zelda. Meli is a prefix, like the word for king is Melech in Arabic and Hebrew, Melech. So, and the holy goddess is called Malka. So there's the Meli prefix on Zelda. So essentially, Sabbatai Zevi was singing about Princess Zelda, who needs to be rescued from the forces of evil. So that's another fun Gnostic Nintendo factoid that I talk about on my blog.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, there's a former host, a cult fan. Vance, of course, knows who we're talking about, besides talking a lot about how Tool is the greatest band in the world. He actually wrote a lot of blog posts on the Gnostic themes in Zelda. So
wow.
They were pretty good. So we see that a lot.
What about the apes in the barrels, though? Is that remember?
Oh, God, we got to figure that one out.
All right, to be discovered next time.
Yeah. So much to get our hands dirty. But
just something about apes and monkeys. So in the Kabbalah, the word for monkey is koth, and they say that's kind of symbolic of the demiurge because it's mimicking a human the same way that the demiurge mimics, or they would say Samael mimics God, and that the Sitra Akra, the Kelly pot, is an inverse reflection of the true order of the universe, and it's like a mirror image. So just to there's our Gnostic Donkey Kong. I can't go any deeper than that, but it is sort of a symbol of the demiurge in a way.
The barrel's like a shell, right? Yeah.
There you go. With the banana and the fruit and the peel and the husk. Yeah, you got to get the fruit from the peel. The fruit, the shell precedes the fruit. You got to get the fruit out of the barrel. Yeah.
Same thing.
Cool. Well, I think we better wrap it up. I see. I don't know if anybody has any last super chat or question. Thanks for the cool conversations over there. And everybody again had some great remarks talking about again Nagas and other legends out there. And like you said, they are truly universal. Again, these are things that are all over the place. And what other blog posts are you working on?
Oh, I have a lot of unreleased stuff. I have a series on Sabbateanism where I talk about. I'll hopefully release those soon, since this podcast gave me some momentum to. Hopefully people will be checking that out, and I can make those public soon. But another thing I've been working on is the Brotherhood of Saturn, the Fraternitas Saturnae. I have a bunch of stuff about that. I heard your interview about that topic, and that's a fascinating one. And aside from the Kabbalistic and Gnostic stuff, which is kind of more ancient, and I also kind of specialize in the Enlightenment era, like Illuminism, secret societies, and whatnot. Cagliostro, Jacob Falk, and the Illuminati even is something that's been I have a lot of research about that kind of that's been misrepresented a lot. And so it's pretty broad, although it's all connected in a way. But and then I have my original first 3 posts were about mesmer and mesmerism. That's pretty fascinating because that also has its roots in the secret societies. And I'm just trying to connect the dots, man.
Awesome. Well, then we hope to have you on in the future. Or maybe we can talk about mesmerism, whatever, Brotherhood of Saturn. Obviously, for those of you out there, Stephen Flowers' book is very good. But yeah, we hope to have you when you've got some more research and we can continue this vibe. This
I would love to.
video came, if you would. Yeah, that's it. As somebody said in the chat, yeah, please like and subscribe. I know this show is pretty shadow banned. But if you subscribe, it will and get the word out there. It will help. And of course, always, I really appreciate your support for AM Byte any way you can. Patreon, one-time donations, whatever you can do so we can keep the sparks on here in the darkness, if you would. Here with us in the Shekinah and the other misfits of the universe. But yeah, we're at the end, I guess. Vance, thank you very much for keeping us company here to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
It's a privilege and honor to be a part of our own secret society.
We know who is behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Well, Jon, again, thank you very much for coming on. And yeah, thanks for bringing your excellent research. And we hope to talk rather sooner rather than later, unless of course they throw us in some camp or something, because we've been talking too much.
Yeah. I thank you so much. I'm so excited, man. It's such an honor.
Oh, the honor was ours.
Yeah, we should stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, thanks for bringing
great stuff.
Yeah,
really enjoyed chatting with you tonight.
Thank you. Well, for everybody out there in the Kenoma, out there in the world, please take care of yourself. Please write your own gospel, live your own myth. We're running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. And have a good weekend. Have a good rest of your week. And yeah, excellent shows coming next weekend in September. Good night and take care, everybody. Thank you for being here.